Today, we're going to talk about making better forms. Forms, of course, are the ubiquitous methods by which you can collect input from your users. And we're going to talk about how the new technologies that are available in the things collectively known as HTML5, which includes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, can make better user experience in your forms. My name is Jim. I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm a web developer and teach front-end development. Today's big ideas. Big idea number one. HTML5's form features, the new things that are in HTML5 specifically about forms, make life easier. They make life easier for you as a developer, and they can and often do make life easier for your users, for the folks who have to actually use these forms that you're creating. Big idea number two. Unfortunately, most browsers don't support these new HTML5 features yet. I know it's a drag, and it's the way of the internet and the way of web development. Some browsers support some things better than others, some things are widely supported and some are not. It's a drag, and it's the standard way. We've all had to deal with this for years and years and years. Big idea number three. Even though they're not being supported by all the browsers, use them anyway and provide backup solutions. Here's what I mean. Use the new technologies in ways that don't hurt older browsers that don't understand those technologies. And for those older browsers, provide an alternate way to get to the stuff. This is actually kind of easier than it sounds, and we're going to talk through that in the next half an hour. Big idea number four, I also wanted to tack this on. It doesn't have to do with the other three big ideas so much, but I want to walk you through how to make pretty buttons. So today we're going to make some pretty buttons, and we're going to walk you through how to make neat rounded corner buttons that have a nice background and they look really sweet and they don't have images. You could do them entirely in CSS. So big idea number one. HTML5's form features make life easier. Let's walk through some of those form features now. Let's take the input tag. This is an ancient tag as old as the hills. The input tag is also a Swiss Army knife type tag. It does a bunch of different things, but the most plain thing that it does is this, the input type of text, which is just a text box where you can type in something. It's not a big text box, it's just a one-liner. You've seen this everywhere. It's search fields, it's when you type in your name or email address. It's a plain Jane text box. Now the input tag is also a Swiss Army knife because if you change the type attribute of the input tag, you can have vastly different behaviors out of that tag. You can get a radio button, which is when you can choose between several different options. You can have a checkbox, which means you can choose multiple options. Input type of file is for uploading a file from your desktop. And the input type of submit, of course, gives you a submit button. This has been standard in HTML and hasn't changed a whole lot. Input type file was relatively new, but this has been the standard. Now, HTML5, these new sets of technologies that have been around for a couple of years and are starting to be adopted by browsers, include a whole bunch of new input types. Here are all of them. Holy cow, that's a lot. Okay, so let's start from the top. I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but I'll brush through them real quickly. The first one's for telephone numbers, for email addresses, for URLs or web addresses, for when you have to search for something like a Google search, you know what I'm talking about, for numbers specifically, and you can limit what kind of numbers, like you can say only positive numbers or only negative numbers or only integers. You can do ranges, which is a number from 3 to 10, say, or from 1 to 100. You can do colors, which is when you pick an actual color, red, blue, green, pick a color. Date, when it lets you pop up a calendar, you can pick a date. Time is like the same thing, but it picks a time instead of a date. Date time puts the two together. Date time local puts the two together, but without a time zone. Oh my gosh, this is a long list. Month lets you choose a month, and week obviously lets you choose a week. So all these different types, and spoiler alert, they're not all supported by browsers yet. In fact, I think only one kind of browser, Opera, supports all of these, and all the rest just to support some. So hang on, before you freak out about that, let me keep going. So let's start with the simple input type of text. This is plain Jane input. This is what it looks like on an Android mobile phone. You've got a text box, you've tapped into that text box with your finger, and a little virtual keyboard pops up where you can type in stuff. You know what we're talking about here, you've seen this. Now, if you change that input type from text to tell, without doing anything else, no other CSS, no other JavaScript, nothing else in the world, Android is smart enough to change the virtual keyboard to a phone pad. It knows you don't care about putting letters into a telephone field, so it changes it for you. That's all you have to do. Okay, let's keep going because other browsers do a similar sort of thing. The iPhone, like an Android, is smart this way. And if you put, for instance, an input type of email, it's smart enough to change its browser too. But it changes its browser in an interesting way. It leaves the keyboard. But down here, these three buttons are different. It's got a space bar that's a little bit smaller to make room for an @ sign and a period, because those are the kinds of things that you need when you're typing an email. So the folks at Apple decided that when you're typing an email, let's make it easier for people. Android's done the same thing. Fabulous. Now, what about input type of email when you're not on a phone? If I'm on a laptop or a desktop, I don't have a virtual keyboard like this where they can change keys around. You have a physical keyboard, which all of you actually have one of these right in front of you. So the input type of email in Chrome on a desktop computer looks like this. And there's nothing new about it. There's nothing different or strange about it at all. No virtual keyboard pops up. It's just an input type. It's just an input, like a type of text. Firefox looks the same way. Heck, even back to old IE6 also looks the same way. And here's the deal. With this input type of email, actually with any of these input types, if a browser doesn't understand it or can't do anything with it, like our old friend IE6, it just provides us a text box, which is fine for email because all you're doing is typing in text anyway. It just doesn't give you the added cool stuff that you might get on an Android or an iPhone. So these four are text types that you might frequently use that may not have a whole heck of a lot of effect on a desktop, but can have a good bit of effect on a mobile platform: telephone, email, URL, and search. So let's try these together, shall we? So I'm going to jump over here to some code. Let me walk you through what's happening here in this code. I've set up a form, which you can see here in my Chrome browser, and the code is over here, and this is a pane right next to it. This form is for a fictional a fictional house painting company because I wanted to make it like a contact form, but I wanted to be able to do things like date pickers and color pickers and things like that, which we're going to get to in a minute. That's why it's a painting company. So here's what's going on in here in this form. This is an HTML5 document. We know that because it has this doc type of HTML and this meta tag here. Otherwise, everything is just the same as regular old HTML that you're used to. We've got a form down here with an action of £, because I don't want it to actually go anywhere. It's not actually submitting anything to anybody. We're just doing it here to test and see what's going on. And we've got two inputs, an input type of text for the first name and an input type of text for the last name. We've got these labels here too, which hopefully you all know. You really do want to put labels on your forms, and you want to add this for attribute that corresponds to the ID of the input type. That's better for search engines, it's better for screen readers, and it lets you do neat stuff like when you come over here, you can click in here to get into this first name, but you can also click on the label itself. Kind of cool. You can click on the words to get into that text box where you can type things in. That's the fanciness of this label tag right here. Anyway, this is not what I came to show you. What I came to show you were some of these other input types. So let's add an input type for telephone, for instance. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to copy and paste the last name and change it to be for phone. I'm going to change the label here. I'm going to change the ID to phone and the name to phone. And hit save. It's going to refresh over here. We've got first name, last name, and phone number. Okay, so first name is Barack Obama, 202-555-1212. Delightful. Okay, but this is an input type of text. We haven't done anything new here. I'm going to change it now to an input type of tel. Hit save, come back. All right, I'm Thomas Selleck, the famous actor, 202-555-1212. Boom. Looks great. Doesn't do anything different. And that's the whole idea. It works just fine. There's nothing weird or different here about this particular thing. So this works fine. I can submit the request, but it's not going to do anything because it's not actually going anywhere. Let's see what it looks like on an iPad. Here's my iPad simulator. I'm loading up the exact same page. Oops, I've got to... Loading up the exact same page. I come here to the first name, and I type in Jim. The last name, I type in, oh, spoiler, Webb. And I go to phone number, up, and it takes me to the keypad, the iPad version of the keyboard that's specifically for phone numbers. So the iPad made a change for me, desktop browsers didn't, and everything works great. The numbers here can be whatever phone number I want to type in, and I can place the request, and otherwise it works in exactly the same way. The fields turn blank because the form is submitting to itself. This is normal behavior. Everything's working just fine. Okay, so that's what's happening when you use an input type of tell, for instance. The same thing is true of email. The same thing, the input type of email, it would bring up a slightly different keyboard. On the iPhone, we're going to give this an ID of email and a name of email. Everything's going to be email on this one. So here on the Chrome browser, works fine. Nothing different or unusual about it. You can even type in something that's not an email, like hello Dolly. It doesn't care. It makes no difference to it. It's just a text field to it. You can place the request. Oh, look at that! Did you see what happened there, everybody? When I submitted the form here, because I've said a type of email, the input type is email, Chrome was smart enough to say, oh, this does not look like an email address. And Chrome stepped in without me doing anything else and said, that doesn't look like an email address. I'm going to pop up a warning. Watch, I'm going to do it again. Place the request, and this pop-up says, please enter an email address. That's Chrome helping me out in this way, and I didn't have to do a darn thing except set the type to email. That is pretty cool. Now, this thing that pops up, a couple of things about it. You can't customize it. You can't make it a different color. You can't make it a different, you can't even change the words in here. Well, there's some hacky ways that you can do it, but generally speaking, there's not a lot of styling that you can do to this thing. But you didn't have to do a bit of work in order to make it happen. Pretty cool, huh? One more thing I want to show you real quick, and then I'll go back, is the search field. Now, this having a search field doesn't make any sense at all in this particular example because you wouldn't have a search box. But I'm doing it because I want to show you what Chrome does to a search field. The only thing different here, I copied and pasted, and the only thing different here is that the type is search. And what it did over here was it made the search field have rounded corners. Now, I'm on a Macintosh. On a PC, it won't do that. But on a Mac, this is what search fields look like. And so the browser is changing the style to make a search field look like they do on Macintoshes, so that it's more apparent to regular folks who aren't nerds like you and me what this thing is. Moreover, when I type in here, and I type a search for something, this little X box comes up. That X box is something you see on many Macintosh designs. It's there on the iPhone, it's there on the iPad, it's there on the desktop Mac, and that X X's out the term that you've searched for. All that happens completely automatically and by the browser. Now, that's only going to happen on a Mac and only going to happen on certain versions of browsers on Mac. And on an iPad it might be different, and on Windows it might be different. And the point is, that's supposed to be okay. That we're letting the browser take care of making a search box look like the way a search box should look on that particular browser and that particular platform. So it's a little bit of a sea change from we as designers wanting to control everything and make everything look exactly the same everywhere. And instead, what this is saying is, I want you to make it look good for the computer that the user's on, rather than making it look the same everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to take away this search form because we don't need it for this particular example. But I wanted to show you how search forms work. I think that's interesting and important. Okay, we're back here. Let's go back to the presentation. I'm going to walk you through, hang on, I'm going to stop here and ask if there are any questions from the audience. This is a good place to stop. And if the panelists have questions that they'd like to let me know about, please do. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Jay, we've got a bunch of people asking you about the iPad simulator that you're using. Do you want to just quickly mention that?
That's a great question. Yeah, this iPad simulator rocks. Okay, here's what it is. The iOS simulator, it actually comes with it's free from Apple. It's a piece of software called Xcode. And you can go to the Apple website and you have to sign up to be a developer. But the piece of software is it's here. You can get. I think you can even get it from the Mac store. It's called Xcode, and deep inside of it is included a simulator that lets you simulate the iPad, and iPhone. It's really quite handy. It's a pain to get to, so I'm not going to walk you through how to do it, but if you want to know how to get this on your machine, on your Macintosh, it's not for Windows, but if you want to know how to get it on your Mac, it's free, and go Google for it. iPad simulator or iOS simulator and Xcode, and you'll be able to find the instructions for how to get it. Cool. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to walk you through a couple of other form input types. First, the input type of color. This pulls up a color picker where you can choose a color. Now, you see here in this screenshot 3 different kinds of color pickers. This one's for a Mac. This is for, I think, Linux, and that's a PC one. Or maybe that's a PC one in the back. My point being, you don't get to choose what kind of color picker they get. The operating system in the browser gets to choose, because what makes sense on an iPad might not make sense on a Windows machine. So you don't get to choose, they get to choose. Another one is the input type of date, where a calendar and a date picker comes up. Again, you don't get to design this. That's the trade-off of having the input type of date there and making it incredibly easy for this thing to come up, is that unless, I mean, you can override it and with some JavaScript and do your own crazy stuff. But if you don't, it comes up as it is and you don't get to do anything with it. Let's do those real quick, or let's do one of those real quick. Or no, actually, let's do both so you can see what they look like. So here I'm going to pull up, where did we go? There we go, perfect. So if I pull up the date picker, I'm going to copy and paste this for the date that they would like their house painted. And the input type will be date. I'm going to make the name and ID the same here. Over here, boom! Just by making the input type be date, this thing comes up with this guy right here, month, day, and year. And click on that, and a placeholder should come up. But is not. Interesting. Why is that? Let me refresh that. Huh. Don't know what's going on there, fellas. A date picker normally comes up, and we'll troubleshoot that in a second. Let's move on to color. Again, it's just as simple. It may be that it didn't like that I used the same. Hey, color. I click that, and oh, here's what happens, folks. I'm sorry. This popped up on my other monitor. I've got 2 monitors here on the screen, and this guy popped up all the heck the way over on the other side of the monitor. I didn't even see it, so it's working fine. The color picker comes up here, and I can choose a particular color. It shows up here in my color picker, and then close it here. What gets sent is the hex value of that color. That's what actually gets sent to the server. So date and color also work just fine. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation here. Great. There are a number of attributes, and these are pretty helpful and important. I'm going to go through some of these. Required, placeholder, and autofocus. Let me walk through these 3 with you. Required, placeholder, and autofocus. Required means that the form can't be submitted without it. And again, this is stuff that we all know we have to deal with in forms, and HTML5 makes it super easy. So if I say that the first name and the last name are both required, I could type in Jim and no last name right now, hit submit, and the form submits just fine. Again, it becomes blank, means it's submitting just fine. If I came in here to my code, and to this input tag, here's the first name right here. All I have to do is add the attribute of required. I don't have to say required equals something. All I have to say is the word required. And it makes those two inputs that I put the word required on be required. So I come back here and I've refreshed the page and I type in Jim and I don't enter a last name. And Chrome pops up and says, please fill out this field. Now, again, you don't get to style this. I wish you did, but you don't. Well, you can style it in certain instances, but it's not super easy. So Chrome is stopping me from doing this stuff. Those circles are coming up when I'm clicking things. Chrome is stopping me from submitting the form until I type in the second one, and then I can place the request. Form submits just fine. I can put required on any of these things. I can make the phone number required, but the name's not required. That works just fine also. Now the phone number is required. You notice how email is working fine. If I type in something that's not an email address, it will eventually bark at me once I type in a phone number, 1212. Now it's going to bark at me because I haven't entered an email address. But if I don't enter an email address at all, it's fine. It's no problem. That's because I haven't set that email is also required. So now both my phone number and the email are required. If I didn't put those in, it wouldn't work. But it does work now. Yay! I'll try it without an email. Doesn't like me. Says please fill out this field. Fantastic. Okay, that's required. The second attribute I want to walk through with you is placeholder. Oh, placeholder. I can't tell you the number of times I've had to solve this with some crazy JavaScript and CSS. I want something to appear inside these boxes when the page first loads, but when the person types, it goes away and I can type in whatever I want. Kind of like what's happening here with month, day, and year. Super, super easy in HTML5. Just go to the input tag that you want to add the placeholder and add a placeholder attribute. It's all one word, not two words. Type in the text that you'd like to appear. Enter first name here. Boom, it comes up here. It's in a slightly gray color, which you can control on some browsers. When you type in to enter in there, it's still there, but as soon as I start typing, it goes away and my thing comes in. If I delete my name, the placeholder comes back. Oh, delightful. Oh, it's so much easier than having to arrange all this stuff in JavaScript. Enter last name. Oh, yes, look at that. Very nice. So that's placeholder, and it'll work for any of these guys. It'll even work for color, too, color and date. So placeholder and required, two very helpful attributes. The third attribute that's in the list is autofocus. Autofocus is an attribute that's sometimes used for evil, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. What autofocus does is says when the user comes to this page, it gives focus to a particular form field. You can only put it on one form field. I'm going to put it on the input here for the first name. To add it, you just add the word autofocus as an attribute. Then when you load this page, first name already has the cursor blinking in it, and you can start typing. Let me do this again. I did not type anything. I just hit reload, and first name is ready for me to go. If I took autofocus and I removed it from here, and I put it into, let's say, phone number, and save, when I come over here, phone number now has the autofocus, and it's what's selected when you first come to the page. Now, this can be used for evil because I don't know if you've experienced this. I certainly have and others have, where if a page loads very slowly, but then focus is given to a form element, then the behavior that sometimes people have of using the arrow keys to scroll up and down a page, where they'll actually tap the arrow key on their keyboard to scroll up and down a page, is now broken. You've broken that behavior because now the arrow key is inside this form field, and they weren't expecting it to be inside that form field. So autofocus is an attribute that you should use after careful thought to make sure that it's not going to be confusing or deleterious to users. Okay, we're a little short on time, so we're going to keep going here. So the deal is that of these new elements that we've created, not every browser supports them. That's unfortunate, and it's the fact of life. Let's take the input type of color. That's the color picker that we saw earlier, and we saw it working fine. On my machine, which you're looking at right now, it's Chrome on a Macintosh, and the color picker looks like this. On Internet Explorer 6, as an example, or a browser that does not support the color picker, it looks like this. It's just a text field. Now, in some ways this is awesome because I didn't break anything. The Internet Explorer will handle the form just fine. It'll submit the form to the server just fine. And if I typed in a color, it would work just fine. But you don't get the cool color picker. So it's not going to break stuff in old browsers if you use these new input types. But it's not going to necessarily show what you want it to show. Let's take the input type of date. Here's what it looks like on a desktop browser where you've got a date picker pulled up. And on IE6 and on older browsers like IE6, you just get a text field. So not wonderful. But they'd have to type in the date themselves, and you'd have to validate it and make sure that it's actually a date, and sometimes you might get garbage data. How can you know what browsers support what? Well, I'm really glad you asked that, Jim. Sites like caniuse.com are a fine way to see what supports what. For instance, here in this particular screenshot I pulled up, these are form features in HTML5. Red means it's not supported at all. Dark green means it's supported kind of. And light green means it's supported fully. So even today, Opera is the only browser that supports all, and some iPhone and iPad stuff that supports all of these new HTML5 forms. And even then, it's not actually all of them. It's just a whole bunch of them. But even modern browsers like Chrome and Firefox and IE10, they don't support all of them. They support some, but not all. Which ones do they support? Well, this site and others can give you more data on that. This is sort of the snapshot view. So you've got elements that you've created in HTML5. They don't work in older browsers, so what do? You use them anyway, and you provide backups. What do I mean by backups? I mean a JavaScript backup plan. Like if a color picker, is not supported in a particular browser, there are JavaScript versions of color pickers that work just fine in IE6 or in old browsers, and we got to use them instead. So what it means is that you have to create a page that asks, hey user, does this browser support HTML5 validation, or does it support the HTML5 color picker, or does it support the HTML5 email field, or whatever it is that your particular form is doing? And if that particular user, if that user's browser supports it, if the answer is yes, then your page has to say, okay, cool, you do that color picker, it's all yours, fantastic, thank you very much, okay, thanks, bye. But if it doesn't support it, if the user's on a version of like IE6 or IE7 or IE8 or IE9, then you've got to step in with a backup plan. So if the browser doesn't support it, you've got to step in with your backup plan. Okay, I'm gonna say this another way because it's a two-step process, and I want to make sure that I'm clear about it. First step is your page has to ask, does this browser, the browser that's currently visiting the page, in other words, the user right now, does this browser support HTML5, whatever it is that we're using? Does it support validation or color pickers or date pickers? And if it doesn't support it, then your page has to execute the backup plan. All of this happens, these two steps happen with JavaScript. Now thankfully people that are smarter than you and me put together have made JavaScripts that make this relatively easy for us. You could write it from scratch, but it's much easier to use what somebody else has already done. So one piece of JavaScript asks the question, does this browser support HTML5 whatever? Whatever your particular page or form needs it to support. And there are a variety of different scripts that do this. The industry leader right now is one called Modernizr. Modernizr is something we talked about in the last session. Modernizr is free. You can go to their website and download it. Their website is super confusing, and for that I apologize for them. But you can just download what they give you and it'll work fine. And what Modernizr does is it just tests browsers to see whether they support certain things. Like it asks the question, hey can you do a date picker? And then can establish whether or not that particular browser can or can't do that thing. It doesn't actually modernize anything. It's poorly named. All it does is it tests to see if a browser is modern. It doesn't actually change anything in the browser. So that's step one. Step two is that you've got to install a backup, a JavaScript backup for browsers that don't support those HTML5 things, whatever the things are that you're trying to support. These JavaScript backups are ones that you can write yourself, or you can use what other people have written. Either one's totally fine. The ones that other folks have written tend to go by a series of generic names. One generic name is called a shim, a piece of JavaScript that takes care of a gap that's in old browsers. Another one's called a fallback, another generic name for this. Another generic name, and my favorite, is called the polyfill. The polyfill is named after a brand of spackle called the polyfilla, for covering over, holes in walls. And what a polyfill does is it covers over holes in old browsers. Here is a screenshot of the Modernizr GitHub account, so it's part of this Modernizr package, where the folks there, the incredibly smart folks, have put together a huge list of all the reputable polyfills that are available on the internet that anyone's written for all kinds of things. This is an incredibly long list, and it's got a little dirty word in there, which is why I blanked it out. But it's an incredibly long list, and there's not one polyfill that I'm going to tell you to get. There's not one shim or thing that's going to solve all your problems. This is where it gets a little bit hairy, is that you've got to research these and see how they do for you and for your audience. I wish there was one thing, but it's just not the nature of how this works. So let's put these into place. I'm going to use a polyfill that that I like and will hopefully work fine for us. First thing I'm going to do is take this form that we've got here, and it's got our date picker, which is coming up on the other screen, so it's not going to work for you. It's got the color picker. That one's working just fine. And it's got these things where if you don't fill out the phone number, please fill out this field pops up. Let's see what this looks like on IE6. I could pull it up here for you. Great. We'll do that through those two JavaScripts that I told you about. One's called Modernizr. Oh, here we go. One's called Modernizr, and the other is a polyfill, which I'm going to download for you. So here's that same house painting request form. First name, last name, phone, email, date, and color. Hey, you see date and color? They're not the color picker like we saw on the other guy, and the date is not the date picker that we saw on the other guy. If I try to submit this form with just entering my first name, this is live on IE6, by the way, the form submits just fine. So the validation didn't happen either. It's not checking to make sure that it's a phone number. I could type in anything I want here for email address. It does not bark at me. It takes it all fine. Now, the form is submitting properly. You can see evidence of it up here. I don't have it hooked up to anything, so it's not actually doing anything. But the mechanics of it are working just fine. Okay, let's install the polyfills here to make this guy work, even on the good old IE6. I've downloaded. Here's the file, the folder that the class is in right now, that this document is in right now. That's the document that we're editing. I've downloaded Modernizr. .js from the Modernizr website. I've done that to save some time. I'm going to install it into the file that we're working on here. So all I have to do to install Modernizr is up here in the head, or I don't have to do it in the head, but I'm going to do it in the head. It's just a regular old script tag. And you remember, because this is HTML5, I don't even have to say that it's a type of text JavaScript. It's smart enough to know that. So I've installed that, and let's see what it looks like here. This all still works fine on Chrome. And let's see what it looks like in IE. I'm going to refresh it here. And it looks the same in IE. Oh, crap. I thought that was supposed to do something. No, it doesn't. Modernizr doesn't actually do anything on its own. Modernizr is asking is a setup for being able to put other things in. Modernizr, remember, this is the misnomer script. It doesn't actually modernize things. It just asks the question, is this browser modern? So that other JavaScripts can then do their work. Now I'm going to install a polyfill. This is a particular one that I like, and what I like about it, by the way, this polyfill, Modernizr, all the stuff that I'm showing you, I'm sending you links to in the forum after this is done. So if you're lost here and you feel like you're trying to write down URLs, don't sweat it. Got you covered. I'm going to send you links to all this stuff so that you can do this on your own. This is the polyfill I'm going to use. So here on GitHub, I found it. It's called HTML5 forms. And what this does is it's meant to be sort of a generic implement a bunch of HTML5 form stuff in all browsers. For instance, it'll make all of this stuff work. Range, date, daytime, daytime local, week, and color. And the way that it works is all you have to do is install this guy, and then it does the job of making it work in old browsers and leaving things alone in new browsers. I'm going to go ahead and install it now. I'm just going to run through this quickly, and then I'm going to ask you to do this on your own so that you can get a sense of what's going on. I'm going to install it by adding the script tag here, and instead of going to Modernizr, I'm going to go to the where is it here? There we go. This is the folder that I downloaded from those folks, from HTML5, from them. And then there is a whole bunch of stuff that I would need to put on my website. A whole bunch of CSS and images and JavaScript for things like the date picker and for the color picker, because they got to make one from scratch. So these are all the files that do it. And this is the file that I'm going to insert, and just by virtue of inserting that file, some of the magic will happen. So I'm going to go to the path to that, which is HTML5 forms /js /HTML5.js. I save that, refresh it, did not do a thing here, and I'm looking at it in IE6. By the way, I'm only looking at this in IE6 because it's it happens to be a good bellwether. Nobody actually uses IE6 anymore. Well, not nobody, but very few folks actually use IE6 anymore. But for this example for you, if it works in IE6, then it's past muster. And of course, if you're actually doing this, you're going to want to test it in a bunch of different browsers, not just IE6. But this is a way to go. Okay, so we've refreshed this page here, and so far nothing has changed. And that's because in the instructions here for how this guy works is a wonderful tutorial that I'm also sending to you. The link is wrong, but I'm going to send you the correct link. When you insert the script tag for this polyfill, you've got to also insert an attribute here which says what it is that we're fixing, what it is that your form has inside of it to test for. I'm going to do that here. I'm going to add an attribute that these guys made up. It's called data web form 2 support. And I type in what this particular form has in it that might not work in older browsers. For instance, the color picker is one that might not work in older browsers. Date is one that might not work in older browsers. Placeholder might not work in older browsers. And required might not work in older browsers. So I'm going to save this by virtue of adding that. And I know to add this, by the way, because I read the instructions for this polyfill. This is not something I knew from scratch. I went in and I read the instructions, and that told me how to do what it is that I'm doing right now. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do as well. So I refresh this over here with these changes. Nothing's changed here. Everything's still working the way that it was working. If I submit, it gets angry at me for not having a phone number. I come back over here to Internet Explorer 6, our bellwether. I refresh it. So here, the date picker, when you click in it, pops up a little date picker. And this date picker is being generated through JavaScript by that polyfill script that we installed. Here, the color picker, click, and one comes up. We can change the colors here. Now, this is all happening in a 10-year-old browser in IE6, and it's all happening without us having to do anything but install that JavaScript and get the path right, which hopefully you all will do better than I'm doing. I place the request, and a thing pops up. The placeholder pops up perfectly, by the way. So that is that's one way to solve this problem. My point here around solving this problem is that you can use these new HTML5 attributes. You can use them and they'll work fine in modern browsers. And the workarounds for old browsers, yeah, you do have to do some work. You do. But if you do that work and take care of the old browsers, then what you're saying is new browsers, they can take care of themselves. You don't have to do the same work in a year when IE12 comes out and Chrome 47 and iPad 6, because they'll take care of themselves because you've labeled the fields properly with your attributes here. Great. Okay, let's do some buttons. Yay! If we're making buttons, we're going to make buttons with a couple of different elements. These are all CSS properties that are relatively new in the last couple of years. The first one, rounded corners. This is done with the CSS attribute or selector, not selector, the style of border dash radius. Lets you put rounded edges on each corner. You can put them differently on different corners, and you sometimes have to use browser prefixes to make sure they work everywhere, and we'll talk about that in a second. Another thing we can use for buttons are box shadow. We can put a shadow behind any element, and if that element has a rounded corner, the shadow will work properly around that rounded corner. Another one is shadows behind text. That can be very useful for us. That's different from box shadow because it's around type and not around the box around it. The last one is gradients. So CSS gives us the ability to do gradients straight in CSS, just like you would in Photoshop. The way this particular gradient is working, here in this example, for instance, is that we're saying it's a linear gradient, not a radial one. It's going at 135 degrees. That's the angle. It's going from here down to there. It starts off with this color. This is a hex color at the 0% mark. So there is 0%, there is 100%. That's the beginning, that's the end. And that's what it is at the beginning, and that's what it is at the end. That's how this property works. So let's put these together and do it together. So we're going to style this place request button here. That's what we're going to work on, this guy right here. I'm going to find it in the HTML code. It's this input type of submit. It also has an ID of submit that will be very helpful for us. I'm going to come up here to our CSS and start styling this bad boy. I'm going to select it with the ID. Now, this is a standard button. I haven't done a darn thing to this button. So I'm going to see what I can change here. First thing I'm going to change is that I'm going to give it a little bit more breathing room between the type and the outline. That breathing room is, of course, padding. Let's give it a lot of breathing room. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, hit save instead of refresh. The breathing room doesn't change on at least on Mac stuff until you start changing other properties. Real interesting. So if I change the background color to white, then the padding changes. But without that background color being set, the padding has no effect. This background color is a trigger that I'm starting to want to do some styling to this button, and as a result, it gives me a little bit more control. Now, so I've got 20 pixels of padding here and a white background for this button. It's got this beveled edge on it, and the beveled edge comes default by Mac, and Windows has something similar. That beveled edge is just the border, so we can change this border. Let's change it to a 1 pixel solid gray colored border. Boom, just did it. It's changed now to a 1 pixel solid gray colored border. We can do anything that we could do normally on a border here. Let's make it a 3 pixel double border, and now you've got a double outlined border here for your button. Now if we change the background color from white to, I don't know, let's use a bright yellow like that. That bright yellow is now the background color. Now this type is not really working for me. Let's capitalize this type with text transform. Capitalizes the type for us without us having to do a darn thing. Let's change the font weight to bold. Get that in the middle there. Ooh, that's starting to look like something. Okay, we're not fancy yet. We're getting there, but we're not fancy yet. Next thing I want to do is when I'm hovering over this guy, I want it to be more obvious that I'm hovering over a button. Well, that is really darn easy to do. Here's how you do it. Just like you can do a hover pseudo selector or hovering on an anchor tag, you can do the same thing on any tag, including this submit, this input tag with the type of submit that's got this ID of submit. So what I do here is I say, hey, this ID of submit, when I'm hovering over it, I want you to do something different. Here, I'd like you to make the background, let's make the background color be white and the text color be black. Just for giggles. Let's see what happens. I come over here, and when I change it, it comes like that. Oh, that's not really a dramatic enough difference. Let's reverse that. Let's make the background black and the color be the yellow that we spec'd before. Come back here. Now when I mouse over it, you see that this is changing in a fairly dramatic way. It's not quite nice enough a button for us. I want to do something a little bit different. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change this button to have rounded corners instead of square corners. I'm going to make it a single 1 pixel border here. I'm sorry, 1 pixel solid. Okay. Now I'm going to add rounded corners. It's as simple as adding border radius. Let's make it 6 pixels and see what it looks like. Ah, yeah, so you see you're starting to get some rounded corners here. The rounded corners stay when you're hovering over the element. They stay just fine. We can change the border radius here and make them wider, more round or less round. Now, if you're doing this for real, you need to add several versions of border radius because certain older versions of Safari, which is called WebKit, and certain older versions of Firefox, which is called Mozilla, need these browser extensions added to them. Modern versions don't tend to need that, but older versions do, so we're just being safe for everybody because who knows what somebody's going to come in with, and we have to provide all three. The WebKit border radius, the Mozilla or Firefox border radius, and regular old border radius for everybody else. Usually use regular border radius for everybody else as the last thing instead of the first thing. So now we've got a rounded corner here. So what I'd like to do is to add a drop shadow behind this. So a drop shadow is called a box shadow. The box shadow takes three or four different elements. The first is how far off it is horizontally, how far the shadow is horizontally off the element, how far it is vertically off the element, how blurry it is, and then the color of the drop shadow. So this has created a 2 pixel drop shadow, 2 pixels of blur, that's 2 pixels to the right and 2 pixels down from the element, and there it is right there. I can make it an incredibly blurry drop shadow by doing that. That's 10 pixels and it's a lot blurrier. I could make it be much farther off the button like that. I could make it be crazily far off the button like that if I wanted to, but that's just ridiculous looking. So we're going to take it to 2 pixels, say, and 2 pixels. Fair enough. Now, this color right here, black, it's a little bit harsh for me, so I can take it down to a gray. That makes it a little bit nicer. Or what I could do is I could use RGBA. That's the alpha channel, so I can make a translucent black. So cool. The way you spec that is the same way you'd spec RGB. If you're specing RGB, it would be 0, 0, 0. That's black. See? Got it right there. Now, if I want to make this black translucent, I just add the A, RGBA. The A is for alpha, or transparency, and add a fourth number. The fourth number is between 0 and 1. 0 is fully transparent. 1 is fully opaque. So let's make it 50% transparent, 0.5. I save this, and I get this 50% gray, nice soft thing. Now, why do it this way instead of just making it gray? Well, this can be gray on any background color. It could even be gray on a background pattern if I had going on this page. In this page I don't, it's just white, so you're not seeing the benefit of it. But it's a very nice way to make shadows that look good on any background surface, on any background that we've created for the page. The hover still works A-OK. We've got no problem with the hover. Now, let's add a gradient. So, if we're adding a gradient, do the easiest, fastest, best solution and go to a CSS gradient generator. And here's one of them right here. It's probably the best one. It's like a Photoshop interface where you get to decide what you want the gradient to look like. You can set color stops just like in Photoshop. If you don't know how to do this in Photoshop, it's a good thing to learn. It can be very, very tricky, but you can set what you want the gradient to look like, and they've got samples here for you. And then they provide the CSS code that makes it all happen. Gradients are a kooky, crazy thing because every browser does them differently. It's one place where browsers really have not standardized very well. They will eventually, but they're not there yet. So Mozilla has their particular way that they do it, and WebKit, which is Chrome and Safari, has the way they do it, and Opera has a way it does it, and Microsoft, which means Internet Explorer, has the way they do it. And what these guys have done is they've said, we're going to try to make this gradient that we're seeing here in this preview window work on as many browsers as we possibly can. So let's take an example from this. I'm liking this blue gradient right here. I'm just going to use this as an example. If you wanted to modify it, you can come in here and change the colors and do anything you want. It's a really nice tool that somebody's put together for us. And then you can copy this CSS. I'm going to copy that and then paste it back over here into my code. Whole bunch of stuff, right? But you didn't have to write it. Somebody else had to write it. I save it and come back over here, and the gradient works just fine, just A-OK. It even works in, well, it doesn't work in Internet Explorer because Internet Explorer does not support gradients, and it does not support border radius. You cannot do rounded corners in old versions of Internet Explorer. However, it gets as close as it can. And actually, this does this. They did a nice fallback here in the CSS, so you do see a gradient. However, you don't see the rounded corners, and you don't see the drop shadow. There is no fallback from that for that. And so when you're creating buttons like this, you make them look good in as many browsers as you can, and you make them not look icky in old browsers like our good friends IE6. That's the gist of that's the quick button tutorial. Through the combination of rounded corners, gradients, box shadows, text shadows, and other CSS properties, you can make buttons that normally you wouldn't have been able to do this 5 years ago without using images and all kinds of crazy divs. And really, this is just a plain old input type submit that we've made do this nice and interesting thing.
A couple questions regarding the new form elements. Is it possible to style these and override the default styles for the browser?
Is it possible to style these form elements? Yes, mostly. Text fields you can totally style, no problem at all. You can style the types that's inside of them. You can make them bigger. You can make them have nice spacing. You can't generally style the things like the color pickers. So let me pull this up here. Great. So things like this you can style. You can absolutely style. Color pickers, not so much. You don't have control over what this looks like. The date picker, you also don't have control over what it looks like. The button here, absolute control over what it looks like. The other thing that's a real drag that you don't have control over is checkboxes and radio buttons. You can't style them with CSS, at least not reliably, and that's a real drag. There are good JavaScript alternatives that let you style them and let you replace them with an image of your own. I've used those quite a bit. They work great, but it's not straight CSS. So it is possible to style all this stuff, but some of it you have to be a little bit hacky and use JavaScript.
Can you use gradients on things other than buttons?
Absolutely. You can use gradients on any block level element. It's just like a background color or a background image. You can use it on anything. You can use it on the page. You can use it on divs. You can use it on paragraphs. Anything you want. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for wanting to learn about this new stuff and for keeping on top of latest trends. Thanks again.